Hello and welcome to In Conversation with WLV Doctoral College. I'm Dr Deborah Cureton. I'm the Research Development Manager at the University of Wolverhampton.
And I'm Dr Ben Halligan. I'm Director of the Doctoral College.
Today's In Conversation with WLV Doctoral College is all about ethics. So that's where probably we could put up the emoji of the scream. A lot of people are a little bit nervous about this concept of ethics. There's lots of debates about who ethics applies to and whether it doesn't apply to certain discipline areas. So we're going to talk more in depth about that.
We're interested in particular actually in the process around applying for ethical clearance for your research and pragmatically how long that can take and how you can manage that and ensure that it doesn't interrupt the flow of your research.
So the first thing we wanted to talk about was who ethics applies to and whether it doesn't apply to certain people.
Okay, so I'm doing a PhD.
Yeah.
I need to read 50 books. I'm going to sit in the library for 3 years and read these books and write my PhD. I have no interaction with anybody else. I'm not interviewing anybody. I'm not looking at the archive. Do I need ethical clearance?
Yes.
Why would that be?
Because there's a wider area of research ethics called researcher integrity. So really, research ethics is looking at your researcher integrity rather than just the ethical aspects of your research. Of course, it's going to look at the ethics in detail, but you need to be able to tell an ethics committee about how you protect your data, how you are not going to identify anybody. I mean, if you're making comment on books, they've been authored by somebody. So you might be making comments on authors who could be alive, who may be, if they're not alive, may have descendants, who may be upset or offended by what you have to say about the books that you're reading. There's also your conduct as a researcher. So that applies to every researcher in every field. There are specific behavioural approaches that we have to take as researchers, certain standards that we have to achieve and attain and operate by, and those apply regardless of your field.
So really, I ought to be proactive, and even if I think I'm not dealing with a problematic subject, I'm not interviewing people, I kind of need the ethical clearance to know that it's okay before I proceed with my research.
Yeah. And the world of ethics changes, thinking about ethics changes over the years. So if I go back 10 years ago, using an approach, a research approach that I was using called autoethnography, the very early days of autoethnography, people used to think that it had got no ethical implications at all, because you were talking about your own experience and self. Well, actually, it's riddled with ethical issues, and there's reams and reams of writing on the subject of how you protect yourself, how you protect relational others. So you need, it may be that your supervisors say ethics don't apply to us, but actually thinking in that area has moved on.
Most universities will have different categories of ethics.
Yeah.
So they'll have a kind of low level of just standard stuff. And then if you're maybe interviewing people about a non-contentious subject, there'll be a medium level. Then there'll be a higher level where you're interviewing people maybe about contentious subjects, you're collecting sensitive data, the experiments you're doing in the lab may have some further repercussions if they involve other people and things like that. So most universities will have a kind of fairly quick route for those that don't need much in the way of ethical clearance. So I guess the challenge is that you can only really apply for ethical clearance for the research, the methodological approach, once you've decided and agreed what that particular approach is.
Yeah.
So you may have, say, an inclination you need to interview 100 people, but you're not necessarily sure if it's going to be 50 or 200 or who these people are or where you're going to find them or whether you bring them onto the campus or whether you go to them and what happens with the recordings of the interviews and the transcriptions. So there are all of these questions, and these can take a while to resolve. And usually you'd have to wait until they're resolved before you can put in a very precise application for ethical clearance before you conduct that research.
Yeah.
And I think this is one of the kind of bottleneck moments, because when you've agreed what you're going to do, which may take a while, you may then just want to press on and do it, but you may not if you've yet to be given ethical clearance. So by the same token as only applying when you know what you're doing, we also kind of say you should really try and do it as soon as you can, because the ethical clearance process can take a while. It's a committee. They look at your paperwork. Not unusual for them to come back to you and ask questions and clarification, and the committee will sit only every so often. So sometimes it can be quick, sometimes it can take maybe a couple of months at most universities.
Yeah, and that's it if you're only going through your university ethics committee. If you're working with the NHS, it can take months and months and months to go through their committees because of the work that you're doing and how stringent they are. I mean, not saying that universities' ethics committees aren't stringent, they are. I think a lot of people view ethics committees as red tape. It's something, just a hurdle they've got to get over. And it's not actually. I think if you view ethics committees as another set of eyes looking at your work, giving you feedback on your work, I think you're probably going to get more out of that process. I quite like sending work to ethics because there are going to be bits of concern that you're not aware of. You'll know the stuff that you are aware of, but other people's experience in research kind of brings in other aspects of concern. So having their views actually makes your work stronger and a more solid and a better piece of work through that process. So I quite like it when I get feedback from coming back from a committee asking me for further information about particular things, or asking me, so and so's raised this, and what are your thoughts and how would you respond to that? Because it really does make me think about things that I hadn't thought about.
And it's quite empowering as well, because if you're conducting difficult research, to know that this has been cleared and you're conducting it in the name of your university should give you a lot of freedom to go ahead and do that with confidence.
Yes. The other thing is with ethics as well, once you've got your ethical clearance, that's not the end of it. You need to keep checking to make sure that there's no ethical slip. So it's a good idea as PhD students to put on the agenda every supervisory meeting or every other supervisory meeting just a question saying, have I slipped from my ethics paperwork? Do I need to go back to ethics and ask them to review what I'm doing? Have I made any changes? So I'll use an example from one of my students who was doing an ethnographic piece of work, who was doing some interviews, face-to-face interviews with students. One of the things that cropped up with some students found it very difficult to talk about certain things, and they started to talk online to her in a closed Facebook group, and we then went back to ethics to ask whether we could use that forum as a way of data collection. So rather than running a face-to-face focus group, there was an online focus group. So we hadn't had the online focus group in the original ethics. Now, so we asked for some clarification about whether that could be done or whether some extra information was needed. We sent the information and it was approved by Chair's action. It didn't take very long.
I mean, I suppose the other return of the ethics matter is with the submitted PhD, because where you've been conducting field research, there is an expectation that all the ethics documentation would go in with the PhD. And part of what the assessment may be from the examiners is around the ethical clearance that you received. And if they find a deviation, so if they find that you've gone perhaps beyond what was agreed at the ethical clearance level, or you've not stuck to the processes that you said you would use, or perhaps that they may have issues that, the way in which you presented data may reveal
Yep.
identification that wasn't within the understanding of what you should be doing and so forth,
Yeah.
then you're the person that will be maybe dragged over the coals about this, and quite correctly so, because one of the tasks of the examiners is to make sure that the ethical considerations are secure.
Yeah.
So all this paperwork, you really need to keep
You need to
hold
keep
of it, yeah.
You need to keep hold of it beyond your doctorate as well, because if you're going to be publishing work from your doctorate after it's been awarded, you still need, a lot of journals will ask you to submit your ethics clearance. They want to see it, or they will ask you whether you've got ethical clearance at the very least. A lot of them will ask you to upload the letter to prove it, because journals won't publish research that hasn't got an ethical clearance.
And occasionally you have a case of a student who will submit a thesis without the ethical clearance information, and the examiners have the right to decline to examine it.
Yeah.
On that basis, and most universities, if not all of them.
So we've talked about why it's important to have ethics, that ethics applies to everybody, that it's ethical slide, and
We talked about the processes a bit, and
yeah.
trying to ensure that it doesn't delay research before it proceeds. So the dilemma between only applying for ethical clearance when you know what you're doing, but then knowing that it may take a month or two to get that clearance back once you know what you're doing.
So was there anything else that you wanted to talk about?
No, I think that's about it for ethics. But I mean, it's clearly a conversation for each individual researcher and their supervisors, and it's something that can usefully be discussed at annual progression events and things like that.
Tips around ethics?
I would say that it can be a conversation. It's not, here's what I'm doing, and it gets stamped yes or no.
Yeah.
But it can be some feedback, some amendments, some rethinking, and you can feel affronted by that, but exactly as you said, it can help you develop and clarify your ideas. And
from me, don't try and rush it. So a lot of my students will say to me, right, ethics, that's the most important thing, is to get my ethics. And I say to them, no. The most important thing for you to do at the beginning of your doctorate is the reading. You need to read what's out there, what's been done, why it's been done that way, what you think about. You need to make decisions about what you think about that before you even start thinking about the ethics paperwork. So the ethics paperwork needs to come from an informed position. The writing of that ethics paperwork needs to come from an informed position. Okay. So thank you for listening. As always, if you like our vlogs, please do subscribe to our channel. There is a notification button as well, so you'll get a notification each time we publish a vlog. We publish vlogs every Friday, so if you do like our vlogs, do subscribe. Also, if you've got any ideas for vlogs that you would like us, some topics that you would like us to cover, please put them in the comments below, where we're always happy to receive some feedback. So thank you for listening, and we'll see you again. Bye.
Bye.